American English, American English, American English webinar series. Teach and learn. American English webinar series.
Welcome, everyone, to our fourth session in American English Webinar Series 6, brought to you by the American English team at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Let's start our session today with a great photo submitted by a viewing group in Tarija, Bolivia, at the Universidad Autónoma Juan Mizal Cerrato. We love to see teachers learning and exchanging ideas during the webinars, as well as celebrating their successful completion of a webinar series. Please share your webinar viewing photos by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org. We may feature them in the next webinar. I'm Katie Subra, part of the American English team, also known as Moderator Katie. You'll also see moderators Lauren and Kate in the chat box to help you during this webinar. We'll assist and support you as you participate. Here you can see the exciting schedule for this series. Our next Series 6 webinar, Building Global Citizenship Through Intercultural Language Teaching, will be in 2 weeks on June 28th and will be presented by Tabitha Kidwell. Our webinars are each 60 minutes long. Webinars are often related to a theme found on the American English website. The Teacher's Corner section from the website shown here features resources and lesson ideas related to the month's topic. The theme for June is Building Global Citizens. Next, let's look at how you will participate in the webinars. During these webinars, you will hear but not see the presenter. The way for you to participate is by typing in the chat box, as many of you are already doing. The chat box is where you can ask questions or make comments related to today's topic. We may not be able to answer every question during the session, as there are often hundreds of teachers participating. However, there is another place to ask questions after the session is over, the Ning Community for Teachers, which we'll take a look at in more detail momentarily. The presenter may also ask you questions in the form of polls. These multiple choice questions will appear on the screen for you to answer. Some people may experience technical problems during the webinar. We will let you know if we are having a global problem. If you do lose sound, you can follow along with the caption pod at the bottom of the screen if refreshing your internet browser doesn't correct the problem. Each webinar series consists of 6 webinars. During the series, webinars take place every other Wednesday. Participants who attend at least 4 out of 6 webinars will receive an e-certificate from the Regional English Language Office or local U.S. Embassy after the series ends. To ensure that you are eligible for an e-certificate, we will ask you to submit your attendance at the very end of the webinar. At the very end of the webinar, you will go to the internet link that we provide so that you can submit the requested attendance information. We hope many of you are already Ning community members, but if you haven't registered yet, please do join us. Here you can find resources and discussion questions related to each webinar, as well as all of the webinar recordings and featured materials. The Ning is also where you can ask presenter questions after the webinar and live chat with fellow community members. Before I introduce our webinar for today, I'd also like to encourage you to check out the Teacher's Corner on the American English website. This month, you can find weekly resources there related to the theme, Building Global Citizens. This week, one activity provides ideas for developing a world tour presentation project for your class. Students will get to practice their English while learning and sharing information about a global region, continent, or country. And now for today's webinar, Global Topics, Local Teaching. Have you ever tried to bring global topics into your classroom through community service activities? During this webinar, the presenter will explain how to develop service learning activities that are student-centered and adaptable for local or global issues. And she will provide ideas for helping your students create project proposals, presentations, service action plans, and reflection activities. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Clark Erwin Bilones. Clark started her teaching career in the Philippines with the Peace Corps. She has taught in the Republic of Belarus, Hungary, and the United States. Her pedagogical interests include student-centered learning, vocabulary instruction, and reading and writing strategies. She holds a Master's of Arts degree in Applied Linguistics from Colorado State University. Clark is originally from California, but calls Colorado her home. Welcome, Clark.
Hello out there, and thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate everyone joining this webinar, Series 6.4, and I want to say a special hello to some teachers and English language embassy staff in Belarus. Hello! I saw some people in the chat box, and I also want to thank everyone who was a part of the Ning and discussing some of the pre-webinar questions. That was really great, and we'll talk more about those in a few minutes. And I want to talk about the pre-webinar poll because so many people were volunteering, and I saw about 70% of you had been volunteering before, and about 64% were doing some kind of service-related volunteering with the class, and that was really great to see. And some of you, around 25%, were bringing students to volunteer events, so that's really awesome. Let's get started here. I think many of us teach because we are interested in improving the world. We care about the future of our earth and our country and community, and we want people to be educated, especially our students, and make smart decisions and live productive lives. So service learning is a great way to combine these points. And today we'll be talking about service learning, global issues, and local teaching. Let's look at a few different terms that were a part of the Ning, and some of you wrote about these definitions earlier. And some of these terms are used to describe similar activities, so I thought it was important to look at the different definitions. And if you have ideas about what these terms are, you can definitely use the chat box. So volunteering, what do you think that means? Just anyone can put some information in the chat box. Volunteering, yes, helping others, making a contribution. It's often unpaid work, and usually helping because you care about some issue or people, taking care of animals or reading to students, and you all are entering some great definitions. What about community service? This one can have a few different definitions, but today we'll talk about community service as it relates to volunteering and service learning. Any ideas in the chat box? Working for a community, doing good for the community? Yes. It could be improving an area or the city you live in, picking up trash, planting trees. And this one is confusing because sometimes it can mean, and it has another meaning. If you wanted to avoid maybe some kind of punishment, sometimes you can be required to do community service, or maybe you're required to do service for the community to graduate from high school. So sometimes it's a required activity. Great. And what do you think about service learning? What is service learning? There were a lot of different definitions about this on the Ning. Could be volunteering. Some people have no idea. Someone from Mongolia said learning and service, and that's exactly what it is. It's doing some kind of direct volunteer service, usually physical work, combined with learning and reflection. And reflection is thinking about what you learned, and we will talk more about that. Great. So when we think about global issues and local teaching, one way to connect what's happening to the world is within our classroom, and we can get involved with local service or volunteer organizations. So you can bring the global ideas into your educational system there. You can learn about real problems and encourage students to be part of the solution, and teaching and learning can become very hands-on and active, which engages students in the subject in global issues, and we will talk more about that. Before we go on, I would like to say a little bit about this concept of volunteering. U.S. Americans like to volunteer, but I know that countries and cultures around the world have different ideas and beliefs about volunteering. So I just wanted to let you know that what I present today is my experience, and this comes from my work volunteering and using students for service projects in the U.S. But I have done some of these projects abroad, so just take what you can from today and use it in your classroom if the ideas work for you. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 25% of U.S. Americans volunteer or volunteered in 2015, and that's about 63 million people. And of that group, teenagers had one of the highest volunteer rates. So I thought that was very interesting that teenagers are so involved in volunteering, and since we're teachers, it's a great age to get students out there and interested in the community. I would like now to go to the polls. I love polls, and I have a question for you. In general, what are the views of volunteering where you live? So you can check all that apply. But since we're talking about volunteering, I'm interested in how popular it is around the world, because every country and place can be very different. So it looks like over half of you are saying it's becoming more popular. That's great. And close to about 30%, 25 to 30%, it's not a regular practice. And about 15%, it's very common. Great. I just wanted to know as we learn about these topics. And we can get back to our presentation. So, some things we will discuss this hour are about global issues and how they affect our community, how we can bring them into the classroom, and how we can get students interested in them, or what are students interested in. We will also talk about the teaching aspect, so for our own classes and communities, and how we can use English communication in these activities. We'll talk about service learning projects, and how we can build in some student-centered ideas into those projects. Specifically, some goals for this hour are to be able to learn about what service learning is and see examples, to learn about the main steps to build service learning or student-centered activities into your class or club, and to understand how these activities can help students learn English. I would like to go to the polls again. I'm interested in what you want to learn about today, and you can choose at least one of the following options. Maybe you just want to learn about service learning. How could you get it in the classroom? Maybe you're really thinking you want to participate in that service learning or volunteering where you are, or build a service learning project into your club or class. Or you just want to attend for professional development, and you can check multiple of these. But that's good. A lot of people want to learn about the topic. Some want to bring it into the classroom, and some are doing professional development because we always need that. Great, some really high numbers. Over 50% are interested in bringing it to their classroom. Great. We can go back. And I want us to also talk about some language goals. I want us to think about how we can increase students' use of English in communicative discussions around global issues. And I know from the Ning, many of you were doing this. And we will talk about how to improve students' comprehension in using English for giving directions, following instructions, asking and answering questions. And we'll also talk about encouraging students to express their feelings and opinions while using English. So before we go on, here are some service learning basics. We learned about the definition. And in service learning in the classroom, students should find a project to participate in. They would learn about that issue, whatever it is, maybe through videos or speakers. They will participate in a project, and from my experience, most are pretty short, just a few hours. And they will reflect and evaluate about their work and opinions. And I want to draw attention to these words, reflect and evaluate. To reflect means to think about what you did or how you feel about something, and to evaluate something means to examine it and make judgments or analyze it. And we'll talk about how that fits in a few minutes. I want to present a few examples of service learning at different levels for you to think about, and this will give you some ideas about brainstorming for your own classroom or club that we will do later in the hour. I'm going to talk about two projects, one that was geared towards primary or secondary students, and then an older example of students, and you can see which one will work for your class. Have you seen this picture before, this kind of site out in nature? I think we have all seen something like this, trash piling up. And so this first example is great for younger students, and it's about a trash cleanup. Students learn about plants and animals in a local nature area. They could focus on that. Or they might learn about pollution and garbage globally and locally, because a lot of curriculums focus on pollution and garbage learning. And they could learn why you shouldn't throw trash on the ground. So this would be the learning component of service learning. And then here you see some people on a beach picking up trash, and this is the action. So the service piece would be that students go out to a nature area, or it could be the school itself to pick up trash. And this can be a very short project, just 1 to 2 hours, plus transportation time. And if anyone out there has heard of Earth Day, it's April 22 every year, and this is a really great website to go to if you want some ideas about using Earth Day as a way to mobilize people around the world for an environmental project. So a part of this project, this trash cleanup, is evaluating. So counting how many pieces of trash students pick up, they could weigh their total mass, they could weigh pieces, they could find the heaviest piece, and you could have a competition. You can get students adding all of their trash together, pieces or the weight, and that could be a great math-related activity. Also, they could hypothesize or guess why trash is in nature, and that's part of some science curriculum. And creating solutions and ideas around solving this problem could be a great language arts activity. Also, we want students to reflect, and that's thinking about the importance of the project. So why are they out there? Why are they doing this? Why is it important? And sharing what they learned, discussing how they felt, and giving their opinions. And this is personal. There's no right answer. It could be, their ideas only, but we want to really value that. That's part of some critical thinking and reflecting piece about the project. So you might be asking, these are great, but where do I start? So you could think about maybe a big event or a project in your area that happens once a year, a local problem that students could create a solution for, or maybe a global problem that your students are curious about or interested in learning more about, and you can have them create some local awareness of this. I would like to go to the polls again, and I want you to think about what volunteer projects have been in your area. What have you seen? Have you seen anything take place in your area? Maybe environmental cleanup or protection projects, maybe an NGO-based project, a non-government organization trying to build something or do something, a government-based project, a campaign on health or safety, community, or some of you may not know, you may not have seen any projects. It may not be popular to have volunteer projects there. Oh, but it looks like a lot of environmental projects are out there, cleaning up rivers, beaches, planting trees, and about 43% NGO-based, about almost 41% government projects, and only about 4% of people haven't seen anything. Well, that's good. Over 50% are about community projects. That's great. Okay, good. So most of you have seen some projects out there, and you're aware of it. Okay, my next example, we talked about the service project of trash cleanup, and my next example is service learning with university students. And what this project was is I made it very student-centered. So the students participated in planning, they did research and presentations, they made the decision-making. They were very active, of course, in the activities, the service project itself, and the assessments, and that to me is the evaluations and reflections. I would like to know out there, if you use student-centered activities in your class or teaching, will you raise your hand? If you have ever used more student-centered activities. Oh, I see 100 or more people raising their hands. That is great. Okay, and I love student-centered activities, so I always talk about them. Thank you for that. Here is a little timeline from my class that used the service learning project, and I just want to draw your attention to what we did so that you have an idea in your own planning what some of the tasks were for our service learning project. So at the beginning, we formed groups or pairs, and the students researched ideas from local events going on or what was in their community. they chose a project that they wanted to present and talk about, and then they interviewed that staff or that organization. Then they gave a presentation to the class about this proposal. So maybe they did a proposal about doing a trash cleanup, and one group presented that, and then another group presented something else. And the class as a whole voted on which project to do, and they coordinated the logistics. And we'll talk more about logistics, but it's about all the planning pieces, the transportation and the supplies. They learned more about the project in the class, so they gave us some learning to do about the issues. And then they actually did the project, and we'll talk about what that is. And then, of course, the important piece, reflecting, they wrote some information, some papers out about the project and reflected on it, how they felt about it. And if you were thinking about this, I wanted to include some language learning activities that would also go along with what we were doing in the class. So at the beginning, you could learn vocabulary, present vocabulary to the students, and focus on comprehension activities. You could invite a guest speaker to your class to learn about this issue. That would also be part of the learning piece. Students could write a thank you letter or something to the guest speaker, and we'll talk more about guest speakers. You could also have students read an article, and they can present things to their small groups or talk about that. They could interview an expert outside of class and then come and share what they learned. Oh, I'm forgetting the arrows. They could give presentations on a service proposal, and you can ask the students to evaluate this proposal. We'll talk more about that also. And then they can vote on the actual project if you want them to. What project do they want to do? You can have groups plan different logistics, like one group's in charge of transportation, one group's in charge of bringing water and snacks. You can watch a video and discuss a global topic. I think a lot of you are doing this already. Then you do the project itself, whatever it is, could be the trash cleanup, and then the reflection. All right. So I want to share with you what the students of my class proposed, and I want you to think about what parts of this project might work for your classroom. So the projects that the students presented are the following. One group suggested we volunteer for a 10K race that raised money for suicide prevention. Another wanted our class to cook and spend time with people at a homeless shelter. Another group wanted to start a school club that promotes education and activities to combat a global issue. Another proposed that we collect art supplies to give to children, and this organization had encouraged people to decorate the suitcase that you send it in. And the last group said we should participate in an environmental project with children at a nature area. So these are the ideas that my students came up with and proposed. So remember, also evaluation, very important. So I had them make sure that they were following the rubric, checking all of the requirements. They were evaluating the presentation skills of each group, and body language was one of those issues I wanted them to look at. That they were really thinking about which project interested them and how much time it would take. And then the students voted on the project that the class would participate in. So I would like us to go to the polls, and I want you to pretend that you were in this class, and I want you to choose which project you would have voted for. So if you were part of this class, and I know you didn't see the presentations, but what idea is the most interesting to you? Oh, the student club is getting a lot of votes. So creating the student club that promotes education, almost 50%. So not much for the race. And the race didn't involve us running. It was just volunteering for the race itself. Cooking for a homeless shelter, about 16%. Collecting art supplies is very low, 4%. And nature area, environmental project, about 27. Okay, so it looks like the creating a student club would win if you were voting. And we can go back to our presentation because I want to share what project really won the vote in our class. The winner that the students voted for was collecting art supplies. So it was one of the least popular activities that you voted for, but you could see this Color Our World logo on the side. That was the organization. They're a non-government organization, and they also call themselves COW. But that was the winning project. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what we did so you can think about this for your class, how it was organized. So that's an actual picture of our supplies there. So we read information about where the supplies were going. That was part of the learning piece. We collected supplies from family and friends, schools, anyone we could. We met and decorated 2 suitcases out of class that would end up traveling with the student group. And we stuffed the suitcases with art supplies and gave them to the travelers. And then, of course, students wrote a reflection paper about it. And the end result was that our young students that received the art supplies were able to create really great art projects. Okay. And again, evaluation and reflection is so important. So I required the students to write about their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings, project requirements, the best and worst moments for them, what did they like the best and what was the least favorite, and then something they learned. I really like students to reflect on what they're learning and how they're learning it. So I'm interested again in your opinions, and you can do this in the chat box. I want to know what you think about this COW project. So I see already some people were saying that, oh, COW sounds great from Brazil, and they're interested in using something like that with their class. And do you think this project involved education, direct service, and reflection? So the COW project was the project of getting supplies and giving them to children who wouldn't normally have art project supplies. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, it's a good project, way to learn values, good for those who are interested in art and drawing, empowering learners. Yeah, and I know art supplies are expensive, so that was one bonus. Okay, great. I think you might be wondering, why should your students participate in service learning? I wanted to talk just a few minutes about motivation and inspiration and ways that these projects can promote language learning. Let's look at some ideas. Slide number 1. It helps to improve the world. We know that. And how can students do that? They learn about issues that affect them, and a lot of you do this. You bring in contemporary issues into the classroom through reading articles, watching videos, and doing service. And they think about these issues, they write about them, they discuss ideas and solutions, and this is what we need because they're the future generation. Other reasons to promote service Does anyone out there recognize this photo? It builds relationships among students in the community, within organizations that might be doing service, and even yourself. How you feel about the world and your community can change from doing service. It encourages English communication if that's something that you can make happen as a teacher. So it depends on the project, but you could ask specific questions in English. You can make sure to give directions in English. You can encourage conversations in English. It all depends about the project. And it also helps students to write down new words and find definitions if that's an activity you want to promote within your project. And they can also talk with community members, the organization staff, to learn something new. Another slide about why you should promote it. It develops civic responsibility, and that's how to be a good citizen. So teaching students that everyone can make a difference. These projects help everyone to understand that. And students get a lot of accomplishment, a sense of accomplishment by doing work and seeing results. They can discuss and write up solutions. They can write a poem or a song or a rap about the issue. And they can write an article about it and share it with their class or with their school or even their community. And since we're talking about inspiration for service learning projects and why you might be motivated or interested in doing these, I would like you in the chat box to think about what kinds of projects your students might be interested in. So it might be, oh, my students love animals and they want to help animals all the time. Will you share in the chat box some ideas of what you think students would most like to do? Oh, helping the homeless, I see, in Algeria. Yes, we have that issue here. Field trips, doing art, helping disadvantaged people, serving in an orphanage, helping an orphanage and children. Yeah, these are great projects. So it's good to think about when you're planning or when you're working with students about what they're interested in. Yes, another homeless person project. Public schools, working with schools, great. Those sound like some great projects. But still, there's more reasons to promote service learning. Another is that it really engages students. It gets them moving and doing something, like kinesthetic learning, doing things with your body and movement, doing real work with real consequences. And you can see from this photo, there's some students planting and creating some more green space in their school or natural area. And you might really discover that you see a lot of students building confidence in different ways outside of the classroom, because they might be great problem solvers outside. They could use different strength and skill sets, and they can develop leadership qualities. So some of your students might be quiet in the classroom, but outside they just come alive. So it's great to give them that opportunity. And the last slide about why you should promote this, the motivation. It's great for participants, your students, to develop critical thinking skills. And I know the last two webinars were on critical thinking activities, so this fits right in there. Students can evaluate criteria that makes a good service project. They can evaluate individual project parts, like, was the organization good? Was the timing too short? We need more time to do this project. They can reflect on their service and their experiences. They can reflect on what they learned. And students can do a lot of the assessments. They can do writing assignments, journal entries. They could discuss. And I use this as a formal assessment, their evaluation. And you can see this little chart over here. is just talking about some evaluation questions, developing opinions, judgments, and decisions. And it's good to ask our students these questions, even though there's no correct answer. It gets them thinking. It's really good for us. All right. So, if you are going to design a service learning project, of course, you should do one that fits your needs and your students' needs. You might be interested in trying some student-centered activities, and it's good to know what your students can do and what's possible, based on their age and maturity. And ask your students what they're interested in so that they're very involved, and listen to their opinions and ideas. So this is how you could get started. You could think about different ideas about bringing service into the classroom. You can connect to the curriculum for your classroom activities, and you need to think about who is going to organize the project. You could look at where a lot of projects start, and that's from groups, religious groups, fundraising groups, schools, medical organizations, hospitals, community organizations, social advocates, people who promote environmental work or animals. And I want you to go to the polls again and think about, if you were going to start a project, who do you want to be in charge of organizing it? Would it be a very student-centered project and you want them to organize it? Would you take the leadership role and ask the students to join you? Would you maybe partner with an organization and they can organize it and you bring students along? And maybe some of you are thinking, I don't have any idea. So, a lot of you are going for the student-centered organized project. That seems great. It seems really great. 80%. Okay, it's very high. And some teachers are bringing their students along, and that's good. And don't underestimate the organizations. They can do a lot of work with your students too. That seems good. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. So again, if you are planning a project, you will need to think about what kind of skills or training are needed. Do you need special clothing or equipment? What the temperature might be, and food and water. These are getting into some of the logistics topics. Right now, I would like you to do a little brainstorming activity, and I want you to think about some global problems or issues that you teach in the classroom or in your club, and how your curriculum might work with those to include a service learning project. Remember, you're just thinking. I want you to just think of some ideas, and you can write this down on paper if you want, or just think about it inside your head. But think for a minute or two, and don't worry if these ideas don't work. I see some people typing some ideas, and there are no wrong answers. That's correct. So you might have this great idea, maybe it won't happen, but it's your idea, and that's valuable. So some people are typing that over there, and that's good. You might want to consider, is it a social activity? Get people talking. Is it fun? The fun factor is very important for students. Are they interested in it? Is it a need of your community? And again, connecting to your curriculum. Yeah, and there's a lot of global warming ideas going on. Deforestation, environmental issues, recycling, road safety, food poison. There's so many ideas. I know, you could spend years just doing that. Good ideas. So you could write these down to save for later. I see you're writing in the chat box, and that's good. That is great. So sharing those ideas in the chat box, I love to see them. Fundraising, reading, painting, planting new trees, donating money for cancer hospitals in Egypt. Great. There's a lot to do out there in our world. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk about some global activities in your classroom or club. So, we were talking about service learning activities, and now I want us to move to an actual language learning activity. So something within the classroom. What's a quick activity or something that's easy to write out that you could share with us that relates to a global issue, that uses some communicative English language practice? Does anyone have an idea, a classroom activity idea that you could help with students? So instead of an actual service idea, an English language learning idea. Some superlative and comparative language in Kuwait. Great. Essay writing, writing dialogues, role plays. Yes, so discussions about pollution, debating. Yes, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Working with modal verbs. Oh yes, perfect activities. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some extension ideas for more activities. So one idea is to explore a nature area, like in a trash cleanup, but it could be more of a classroom activity. It could be around the school or some area near your school to look at insects and plants, to learn about those. So you can have students sketch plants and insects. They can research what they found, if they have a way of doing that. And then back in class, students can describe their drawings and what they saw outside. And that's a great activity. Also, a global issue, local issue project idea is to create kind of a table or some kind of little graph where students can poll themselves, either their classmates or their greater community, and they can ask them about big issues. What are the biggest issues going on in the world right now? And they can get ideas, and then they can ask students to vote on which issues they think are the most important and record that data on a graph. So this is a great project that I've used in the classroom for students to get talking in English and to talk about global issues. So they can vote for things, and then they can share their results or their opinions. They could figure out percentages and report that to the class in a mini presentation. And it's really good if they choose different topics. So maybe one group or one person's interested in air pollution and they can have people vote, or they're just reporting what other people suggested as big issues. And I would like to go to the chat box and, oh no, I don't. Never mind about the chat box. We're going there in 1 minute. First, I would like to talk to you about guest speakers. So guest speakers are a great way to get people to come into the classroom and share ideas. A guest speaker can present information on an issue. They can ask questions in English if it's possible for their language. They can research solutions and discuss in class ideas about the guest speaker. This is for the students. And the students can write thank you letters to the speaker. And the students can correct these letters among each other for spelling. So if you have someone come in and they speak English, that's amazing. If not, they can always present in their own language, and students can have discussions and write letters in English to practice that. Another idea is to talk about a controversial issue in the class, and I used this when my students were learning about journalism and bias and neutrality. They can research an issue. If possible, they could watch a little news story online about it. I had the students get into groups of agree, disagree, or are you neutral? You can change up the groups. And then I had the students write a little article in those groups that reflects their point of view. And then they read it to the class and we evaluated. Was it neutral? Was it biased? So just tying some different language activities into a big issue and language. Another idea is a global issue related to a project idea to learn about a health or safety issue. And in another class for grade 8, I had students read articles and facts about malaria. Then they worked in pairs to create a campaign to educate the public. They designed materials. They used a slogan, a song, and a mini poster with 3 facts about malaria and presented it to the class. Great. So let's talk really quickly about some tips and techniques and further reflection on some issues. So going back to the guest speakers, I always like to tell my students I'm not an expert on this topic, but I know experts and we can bring them in to join the class. So a great idea, because it's so interesting as a student to see a new person and a professional, is to invite guest speakers to join your class. They can share their experiences, stories, photos, videos, bring in some realia, and then if you can leave time for discussion and questions, it's better. So do you know an expert? Do you know someone maybe? It could be even a teacher or a staff member, a friend or a relative, someone from an organization, a non-government organization, a doctor, an embassy staff member. Could you, yes, local scientist, someone saying that's perfect. Could you invite someone into the classroom who could talk to your students? And think about when you're doing some projects, service learning projects, is to keep in mind that you may need to get permission from the school or parents. I don't know. That's up to your school policy. And a big logistic is about transportation. Are you walking there? Are you taking the bus? And if you're doing something like a trash cleanup, do you need to buy trash bags? Are you going to use something the school already has, like plastic buckets or pails? Will students need to eat on this trip? So it's good to think about these and to encourage your students to think about these things too. If you do a student-centered project, it's good to plan early to allow for delays, to focus on learning lessons and problem solving. Remember, no project is perfect. There's always issues, and let your students learn from that. And to have fun. So we should always try and have fun with our students, because that will make them interested in being a volunteer again. So I want to go to the chat box for a minute now and think about what are some issues or challenges you might see. Can you think of some problems that you might have in helping to plan a service learning project? I think somebody was saying they couldn't find a guest speaker who could speak English well enough, and that could be a challenge for that particular activity. Financial problems, money, yeah. So paying for things, that's always a big issue. If you needed to get trash bags or some kind of supplies, how do you pay for that? And that's where you might want to talk to an organization. Yes, your school might not allow these projects, and so you can't do it, but maybe you can still talk about global issues in the classroom. or students might want to organize something outside of school. Yes, and if you come from a country or a place that volunteering isn't popular or it's not very positive, that could also be a problem. So again, you can look at these issues inside the classroom and do more language-focused issues instead of service learning issues. And I know we're lacking time for the end here. So just think about some final questions for you. If you learned something new, if you're inspired to do a project, could you use some of these ideas in your class or club? And there is one poll left. After being a part of this webinar, are you inspired to create a service learning project in your classroom? If you could choose one. Oh, whoa, okay, it's adjusting here, so close to 80%. All those slides about motivation and inspiration. It's great, and some people thinking about it, and it's okay. You can say no, you're not interested, because we could just be here for professional development, to think about ideas, to brainstorm. That's part of our jobs as teachers, to reflect, to think about what works for us and our students. So these are great ideas coming out. Okay, and we're out of time. But I want to thank you very much for participating. Check out the follow-up discussion on the Ning and feel free to ask more questions to get more information. Thank you.
For bringing global topics into our language classrooms through service learning. You provided some clear examples of how to incorporate service learning into our classrooms at different levels. And we look forward to the post-webinar discussion and to exploring your resource page as well on the Ning. We'd also like to thank you, our audience, for your active participation today. We look forward to learning with you again in 2 weeks on June 28th, when Tabitha Kidwell will teach us about building global citizens through intercultural language teaching.